After 23 years of military service and building my own tech company from scratch, I thought my family would finally see my worth. Instead, they voted me the least successful family member at our annual Christmas gathering, laughing, as they handed me a participation trophy meant for children. What they didn't know was that in less than 12 hours, my cybersecurity startup would be trading on NASDAQ, making me worth more than all of them combined. My name is Sarah Mitchell, I'm 47 years old, and this is the story of how my family's cruelest Christmas became my sweetest victory. The snow was falling heavily outside my childhood home in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, as I pulled my modest Toyota Camry into the driveway. The same driveway where my brothers used to race their bikes while I practiced drill formations in the backyard, dreaming of serving my country. 23 years in the Army had taught me discipline, leadership, and resilience. But apparently, it hadn't taught me how to impress my own family. As I grabbed the simple gift bags from my trunk, I could already hear the laughter spilling out from the warm, golden windows of the house where I'd grown up. My older brother Marcus had arrived. First, as usual, his brand new BMW X7 gleaming even under the streetlights. The custom license plate read Dental 1, because, as he never failed to remind everyone, he owned the most successful dental practice in the tri-state area. Behind his car sat my younger brother Kevin's massive Ford F-250, detailed to perfection and probably worth more than most people's houses. Kevin had built a construction empire from the ground up, and his success was measured in concrete, steel, and the ability to buy whatever truck caught his fancy that month. Then there was my sister Jessica's sleek Mercedes sedan, pristine white, with heated leather seats that she'd described in excruciating detail during our last phone call. Jessica had married a pharmaceutical executive and spent her days managing their investment portfolio and redecorating their mansion in the suburbs. She'd never worked a traditional job, but somehow, her ability to spend money strategically was considered a professional skill in our family's eyes. I looked down at my own vehicle, reliable but unremarkable, with a few dings from parking in the city and a bumper sticker that read Army Strong that had started to fade around the edges. The contrast wasn't lost on me, but I'd learned long ago that the value of something couldn't be measured by its price tag or its shine. My car had taken me across the country dozens of times as I built my business, attending conferences, meeting clients, and networking with other veterans who understood the unique challenges of transitioning from military service to entrepreneurship. Thought Chai. Front door opened before I could even ring the bell, and my mother's face appeared, framed by the warm light from inside. "Sarah, there you are, honey. We were starting to worry you might not make it." Her smile was genuine, but I caught the slight hesitation in her voice, the same tone she'd used when I announced I was enlisting instead of going to college like my siblings. It wasn't disapproval exactly, but it wasn't the pride I'd hoped for either. "Traffic was heavier than I expected," I replied, stepping into the familiar warmth of the house that still smelled like pine needles and my mother's famous sugar cookies. The Christmas tree dominated the living room, decorated with the same ornaments I remembered from childhood, including the handmade ones we'd each created in elementary school. Mine was a construction paper soldier that I'd colored with green crayons, complete with tiny buttons I'd glued on with excessive childhood enthusiasm. The sound of conversation and clinking glasses led me toward the kitchen, where my siblings had already gathered around the island, each nursing their preferred drinks. Marcus had his usual scotch, neat, the expensive kind that came in a bottle with more words than most people's vocabulary. Kevin was working on a craft beer from some microbrewery he'd probably invested in, while Jessica sipped wine from a glass. That probably cost more than my monthly phone bill. "Look who finally decided to join us," Kevin announced with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We were just talking about the year everyone's had. Marcus bought that new boat, Jessica, and Richard closed on the lake house, and I just landed the Morrison development project." He paused, taking a long sip of his beer. "What about you, Sarah? How's the little computer thing going?" The little computer thing. That's what they called Data Guard Solutions, The cybersecurity company I'd spent the last 5 years building. From nothing. What started as a one-woman operation in my studio apartment had grown into a team of 47 employees, protecting major corporations from digital threats that could cost them millions. But to my family, it was just the little computer thing that kept me busy between what they assumed were periods of unemployment. "It's going well," I replied simply, accepting the beer my mother handed me from the refrigerator. I'd learned over the years that detailed explanations about cybersecurity, government contracts, and enterprise-level threat assessment just made their eyes glaze over. They understood tangible success, buildings Kevin constructed that people could see and touch, Marcus's dental practice with its steady stream of patients, Jessica's ability to turn money into more money through careful investments. "Well enough. To buy yourself something nice for once?" Jessica asked, eyeing my simple black sweater and jeans with the kind of look that suggested she was mentally calculating the cost of my entire outfit. "I mean, when was the last time you treated yourself to something special? A spa day? A new wardrobe? Maybe a car that wasn't made during the Clinton administration?" I felt the familiar heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my voice steady. "I prefer to invest my money rather than spend it on things I don't need." It was true, though they had no idea just how much I'd been investing or what those investments were about to yield. The irony wasn't lost on me that Jessica, who had never earned a dollar herself, was questioning my financial priorities. "That's very practical," my mother said diplomatically, but I could hear the underlying concern in her voice. In her generation, success was supposed to be visible, obvious to anyone who looked. A nice house in a good neighborhood, new cars in the driveway, expensive clothes, and elaborate vacations that provided plenty of material for social media posts and holiday newsletters. Marcus leaned against the counter, swirling his scotch with practiced casualness. "You know, Sarah, there's nothing wrong with showing a little success. People need to see that you're doing well, especially in business. Perception matters. When potential clients see me driving the BMW, they know I can afford quality, which means I must be good at what I do." The logic was flawed, but I'd heard variations of this argument for years. According to my siblings, my modest lifestyle was actually bad for business because it suggested I wasn't successful enough to afford the trappings of wealth. They couldn't understand that some of my biggest clients were attracted to my company precisely because we focused on results rather than flashy marketing, substance over style. "Different industries work differently," I said, taking a sip of my beer and savoring the moment of quiet that followed. What I didn't tell them was that 3 of Marcus's dental practice competitors were actually my clients, protecting their patient data and financial systems from cyber attacks that could destroy their businesses overnight. Or that Kevin's construction company had unknowingly benefited from security protocols I'd helped develop for the municipal systems that processed their building permits and inspections. The conversation shifted to holiday plans, vacation destinations, and expensive gifts, the kind of competitive storytelling that had become a tradition in our family gatherings. Kevin described the ski trip to Aspen he was planning with his wife and kids, complete with lessons at an exclusive resort and equipment that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Jessica was excited about a Mediterranean cruise she and Richard had booked for their anniversary, with stops in countries I'd actually visited during various military deployments, though under very different circumstances. Marcus was planning to close his practice for 2 weeks in January to take his family to Hawaii, staying at a resort that required booking 18 months in advance and cost more per night than I used to make in a month as a young enlisted soldier. The way he described it, with pride and just a hint of condescension, made it clear that this was the kind of success they expected, the kind they understood and respected. When the conversation turned to me, I mentioned a quiet New Year's Eve. I was planning, maybe dinner with a few friends, nothing elaborate. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken judgment, the kind of silence that said more than words ever could. In their minds, my modest plans were just another confirmation that I wasn't quite measuring up to the family standard of achievement. "You work too hard, honey," my mother said gently. But there was something else in her tone, something that suggested she thought I was working hard at the wrong things. "When was the last time you took a real vacation? Somewhere exotic? You deserve to enjoy yourself." What she didn't understand was that I had been enjoying myself, just not in ways that translated into Instagram posts or dinner party anecdotes. The satisfaction of solving complex security challenges, the pride of protecting critical infrastructure, the thrill of building something meaningful from nothing, these weren't the kind of pleasures my family recognized or valued. The evening continued with more stories of acquisitions, investments, and expensive toys, each tale designed to demonstrate success in terms my family could understand and appreciate. But underneath their obvious pride in their achievements, I sensed something else, a kind of restless competition that never seemed to satisfy anyone completely. It was as if they were all performing in a play where the script required constant proof of worth through material accumulation. As dinner approached, I helped my mother in the kitchen, grateful for a few minutes away from the ongoing success showcase in the living room. She chatted about neighbors and old friends, local news and family gossip, the kind of comfortable conversation that reminded me why I'd always loved coming home despite the complicated dynamics with my siblings. "Your brothers and sister worry about you," she said quietly as she stirred the gravy, not looking directly at me. "They think maybe the military didn't prepare you for the business world the way college prepared them. They mean well, Sarah. They just want to see you happy and successful." I nodded, understanding that her concern came from love, even if it was based on fundamental misunderstandings about both my happiness and my success. How could I explain that leading soldiers through combat zones had prepared me for business challenges in ways that no MBA program could match? That the leadership skills, crisis management abilities, and strategic thinking I'd developed in the Army were exactly what had made DataGuard Solutions successful in an industry where trust and reliability mattered more than flashy presentations? But tomorrow, I thought as I helped carry dishes to the dining room, tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow, the financial news would carry a story that would redefine success in our family's vocabulary. Tomorrow, they would learn that sometimes the person who appears to have the least actually has the most, and that real wealth isn't always visible to the naked eye. The tradition of our annual Christmas dinner had remained unchanged for as long as I could remember, with the same seating arrangement that had been established when we were children. Mom always sat at the head of the table closest to the kitchen, Dad at the opposite end before he passed 5 years ago, and now that chair remained empty out of respect. Marcus, being the eldest, claimed the seat to Mom's right, followed by his wife Jennifer and their twin boys, 8-year-old Tyler and Mason. Kevin sat across from Marcus with his wife Angela and their daughter Sophie, who had just turned 12 and was going through what Angela diplomatically called her attitude phase. Jessica and her husband Richard occupied the seats closest to Dad's empty chair, a positioning that had always seemed symbolic to me, as if they were the closest to inheriting some imaginary throne of family success. Richard was a tall, soft-spoken man who worked in pharmaceutical sales management, the kind of person who wore expensive suits to work every day and had opinions about wine that he shared whether anyone asked or not. Their 2 children, 15-year-old Madison and 13-year-old Connor, were polite but distant, the kind of teenagers who seemed to view family gatherings as obstacles to their social media presence. I found myself in the same seat I'd occupied. Since returning from my first deployment, positioned between Kevin's family and the kitchen, close enough to help Mom serve but far enough from the center of conversation to be easily overlooked. It was a geography that had never bothered me before, but tonight it felt more pronounced, as if the physical distance reflected something deeper about my place in the family hierarchy. The dining room table groaned under the weight of Mom's traditional Christmas feast, a perfectly golden turkey that had been brining for 2 days, her famous cornbread stuffing with sage and cranberries, green bean casserole topped with those crispy onions that came from a can, but somehow made everything taste like childhood, and sweet potato casserole with marshmallows that the kids always fought over. The mashed potatoes were real, none of the instant stuff that Jennifer sometimes tried to pass off at her own dinner parties, and the gravy was made from scratch using the turkey drippings and a roux that Mom had perfected over decades of practice. We passed dishes around the table. The conversation naturally flowed toward the year's accomplishments, a ritual that had evolved from childhood show and tell into adult competition. Marcus began, as he always did, by announcing his practice's annual revenue growth, which he claimed had exceeded 20%, despite what he called challenging market conditions. He described the new digital imaging equipment he'd purchased, technology that allowed him to complete procedures faster and charge premium rates for what he marketed as cutting-edge dental care. The investment was substantial, he said, cutting his turkey with the precision of someone accustomed to working with his hands. But sometimes you have to spend money to make money. The new equipment paid for itself in 6 months, and now we're booking appointments 3 months out. Jennifer's been helping with the marketing strategy, haven't you, honey? Jennifer nodded enthusiastically, launching into a detailed explanation of their social media campaign and the professional photo shoot they'd done for the practice's website. She described the process of hiring a marketing consultant who specialized in medical practices, someone who understood how to present dental work as a luxury service rather than a necessity. The way she talked about it, complete with mentions of brand positioning and market penetration, made it sound like they were launching a Fortune 500 company rather than promoting teeth cleaning. Kevin jumped in before Jennifer could finish, clearly eager to share his own achievements. His construction company had landed 3 major contracts in the past year, including a shopping complex that would employ over 200 people once completed. He described the challenges of managing multiple job sites simultaneously, coordinating with city planners and environmental consultants, and dealing with supply chain issues that had plagued the construction industry since the pandemic. The Morrison project alone is worth $12 million, he said, pausing to let the number sink in before continuing. We're talking about a mixed-use development with retail space, offices, and luxury condominiums. It's the kind of project that establishes your reputation in the industry. After this, we'll be competing for contracts I never would have been considered for before. Angela added details about the new office space they'd leased to accommodate Kevin's growing administrative staff, complete with a conference room equipped with the latest video conferencing technology and a break room that looked like something from a tech startup. She seemed particularly proud of the interior designer they'd hired, someone who specialized in creating work environments that attracted top talent and impressed potential clients. The conversation continued around the table, each family member contributing their own success stories and future plans. Jessica described the investment portfolio she and Richard had built, diversified across real estate, stocks, and what she called alternative investments that included art and vintage wine. She spoke knowledgeably about market trends and risk management strategies, using financial terminology that sounded impressive, even when I suspected she was repeating things she'd read in magazines or heard from their financial advisor. Richard supplemented Jessica's financial update with news about his promotion to regional sales director, a position that came with a company car, stock options, and responsibility for pharmaceutical sales across 6 states. He described the challenges of managing a sales team spread across such a large territory, the satisfaction of exceeding quarterly targets, and the excitement of launching new products that could genuinely improve patients' lives. Even the children were encouraged to share their accomplishments. Tyler and Mason had both made honor roll and were playing on traveling soccer teams that required significant financial investment but provided, according to Jennifer, invaluable lessons in teamwork and competition. Sophie had been accepted into an advanced mathematics program and was learning to play violin, while Madison and Connor were involved in student government and debate team respectively, activities that would look impressive on college applications. As the sharing continued, I found myself observing the dynamics more than participating. Each story was carefully crafted to highlight success, growth, and upward mobility. They spoke in the language of achievement that corporate America understood: revenue growth, market expansion, competitive advantages, and strategic positioning. It was a vocabulary I knew well from my own business experience, but in this context, it felt performative, as if they were all auditioning for roles in the same success story. When the conversation finally turned to me, the transition was marked by a subtle shift in energy, the way adults sometimes change their tone when addressing a child they're trying to encourage. "What about you, Sarah?" Mom asked gently. "How has your year been? Are you still working on that computer security business?" The phrase "working on" rather than "running" or "building" wasn't lost on me, but I'd grown accustomed to this kind of linguistic minimization. To them, my business was still a work in progress, a hobby that might someday develop into real employment. They had no framework for understanding a company that existed primarily in the digital realm, that provided services rather than products, that protected things they couldn't see from threats they didn't understand. DataGuard Solutions has had a strong year, I said simply, knowing that detailed explanations would only lead to glazed expressions and polite but uncomprehending nods. We've expanded our client base and brought on additional staff. The cybersecurity industry continues to grow as more companies recognize the importance of protecting their digital assets. Marcus looked up from his mashed potatoes with the kind of patronizing smile I'd learned to recognize over the years. "That's great, Sarah. It's wonderful that you're staying busy. I imagine it's challenging to compete with the big established companies, though. How do you convince clients to trust a smaller operation?" The question revealed more about his assumptions than his genuine curiosity. In his mind, success was measured by size, by the ability to outspend and overwhelm competitors through superior resources. He couldn't conceive of a business model built on expertise, innovation, and specialized knowledge, rather than marketing budgets and sales volume. Many clients prefer working with smaller firms because we can provide personalized service and rapid response times, I explained. Large corporations often have bureaucratic processes that slow down decision-making and implementation. When a company is facing an active security threat, they need solutions immediately, not next quarter. Kevin nodded thoughtfully, but I could tell he was struggling to understand the urgency I described. In construction, timelines were measured in months or years, not hours or minutes. The concept of digital threats that could materialize and cause damage within minutes was as foreign to him as construction scheduling was to me. Jessica leaned forward with renewed interest. "How much does that kind of service cost? I mean, what do companies typically pay for cybersecurity? Richard's company is always talking about IT security, but I never really understood what they spend on it." It was a reasonable question, but answering it honestly would have revealed information that would fundamentally alter their perception of my business and my success. Enterprise cybersecurity contracts often ran into 6 or 7 figures annually, especially for companies in highly regulated industries like healthcare, finance, and government. DataGuard Solutions had clients paying monthly retainers that exceeded Marcus's mortgage payment. But explaining this would have required revealing details about my company's financial performance that I wasn't ready to share. It varies significantly, depending on the size of the organization and their specific needs, I said diplomatically. Companies that handle sensitive data or operate critical infrastructure typically invest more heavily in security measures. It's really about risk management and protecting assets that could be worth millions if compromised. The answers seemed to satisfy their curiosity without providing specifics that would force them to reassess their assumptions about my business. I could see the mental calculations happening around the table, each person trying to estimate what my little computer thing might actually be worth based on the vague information I'd provided. Angela changed the subject by asking about my personal life, specifically whether I was dating anyone or had plans to settle down. It was a question that came up at every family gathering, always phrased with the kind of concerned optimism that suggested they viewed my single status as a problem to be solved rather than a choice to be respected. I'm focused on building my Business right now, I replied, the same answer I'd given for the past several years. Dating requires time and energy that I'm investing elsewhere at the moment. The response generated the usual round of gentle encouragement about the importance of work-life balance and not letting career ambitions interfere with personal happiness. They meant well, but their advice was based on traditional relationship models that assumed financial security required a partner's contribution. They couldn't understand that I'd already achieved the kind of financial independence that made traditional partnership considerations irrelevant. As dinner concluded and we moved toward dessert, I realized that tomorrow's news would require them to completely recalibrate their understanding of success, achievement, and the relative value of different career paths. The little computer thing they'd been politely tolerating was about to become impossible to ignore or minimize. After dinner, we moved to the living room for what had become known as the annual family review, a tradition that had started innocently. Enough years ago when we were younger and proud parents wanted to celebrate their children's achievements. Over time, it had evolved into something more complex, a formalized comparison of success that felt increasingly like a corporate performance evaluation disguised as family bonding. Mom brought out her laptop, a sleek MacBook that Jessica had convinced her to buy last year, claiming it would help her stay connected with the grandchildren through video calls and social media. What it had actually become was a digital scrapbook of family achievements, carefully curated throughout the year with photos, articles, and documentation that would be shared during this Christmas ritual. "Let's start with Marcus," Mom announced, settling into her favorite armchair with the laptop balanced on her knees. The screen filled with professional photos from the dental practice's marketing campaign, images of Marcus in his white coat standing next to expensive equipment that gleamed under studio lighting. There were screenshots of online reviews praising his work, before and after photos of cosmetic procedures that had transformed patients' smiles, and newspaper clippings from the local business journal that had featured his practice in an article about successful healthcare entrepreneurs. Jennifer had prepared a supplementary presentation on her phone, swiping through images of the practice's renovation, the new patient lounge with its designer furniture and complimentary coffee bar, and the staff retreat they'd organized at a luxury resort in Wisconsin. She narrated each image with the enthusiasm of someone who had clearly practiced this presentation, highlighting the strategic thinking behind every design choice and business decision. "The patient satisfaction scores have improved by 37% since the renovation," Jennifer explained, displaying a colorful chart that looked like it had been created by a professional marketing firm. "We've also seen a significant increase in referrals, which is the most valuable form of marketing in healthcare. People trust recommendations from friends and family more than any advertising we could buy." Marcus nodded proudly as Jennifer continued her presentation, adding commentary about their expansion plans and the possibility of opening a second location in the next 2 years. They had clearly spent considerable time preparing for this moment, transforming their business success into a multimedia experience that left no doubt about their achievements. Kevin's turn was equally impressive, featuring drone footage of construction, sites, time-lapse videos of buildings rising from empty lots, and testimonials from satisfied clients who praised his company's attention to detail and ability to complete projects on schedule. Angela had created a digital portfolio that showcased the variety of projects they'd completed, from custom homes that sold for over $1 million to commercial buildings that would anchor downtown redevelopment efforts. "The Morrison project is just the beginning," Kevin explained, using the laptop to display architectural renderings of the mixed-use development. "We're already in talks with 2 other developers about similar projects in neighboring cities. Success in construction is all about reputation, and reputation builds on itself. Each project opens doors to bigger and more profitable opportunities." I see. Presentation included financial graphs showing the steady growth of Kevin's business over the past 5 years, profit margins that had improved as they'd taken on larger projects, and projections for future expansion that included purchasing additional equipment and hiring specialized subcontractors. Angela had even included photos of the company holiday party, showing dozens of employees and their families celebrating another successful year. Jessica's presentation focused on their investment portfolio's performance, with screenshots of account balances and percentage gains that she displayed with obvious pride. She had charts showing the diversification of their holdings, explanations of their investment strategy, and projections for long-term wealth accumulation that included plans for early retirement and extensive travel. Richard's promotion means we can be more aggressive with our investment strategy, Jessica explained, scrolling through images of their latest acquisitions, vacation rental properties in Florida and Colorado that provided passive income while appreciating in value. We're also exploring opportunities in cryptocurrency and renewable energy investments. The key is staying ahead of market trends and not being afraid to take calculated risks. Richard supplemented Jessica's financial presentation with updates about his career advancement, including photos from pharmaceutical industry conferences where he delivered presentations to audiences of hundreds of sales professionals. He showed screenshots of sales reports that demonstrated his team's performance, awards he'd received for exceeding targets, and recognition from corporate leadership that positioned him for further advancement. Even the children were included in this comprehensive family review, with academic achievements, athletic accomplishments, and extracurricular activities documented through photos, certificates, and videos. Tyler and Mason's soccer team had won their league championship, an achievement commemorated with trophies, team photos, and action shots from the final game. Sophie's advanced mathematics program had led to a state competition where she'd placed third, while Madison's debate team had advanced to regionals and Connor's student government campaign had resulted in election as class treasurer. The presentations were thorough, professional, and undeniably impressive. Each family member had clearly invested significant time and energy in documenting their achievements, creating multimedia experiences that could have been used in corporate boardrooms or investor meetings. The level of preparation spoke to how important this annual tradition had become, how much weight they placed on this formal recognition of success. As each presentation concluded, the others offered congratulations and asked detailed questions that demonstrated genuine interest and admiration. They celebrated each other's achievements with enthusiasm, creating an atmosphere of mutual support and shared pride that would have been heartwarming if it hadn't felt so performative. When my turn arrived, the transition was marked by a subtle shift in energy, the way audiences sometimes settle into their seats when they know they're about to watch a shorter, less elaborate performance. Mom opened a much smaller folder on her laptop, one that contained significantly fewer images and documents than the comprehensive portfolios my siblings had prepared. Sarah's had a busy year with her cybersecurity work. Mom began diplomatically, displaying a few photos I'd sent throughout the year. Images from industry conferences I'd attended, a picture of my small office space, and a group photo of my employees taken during our company retreat. The contrast with my siblings' professional presentations was immediately apparent, not because my achievements were less significant, but because I'd never thought to package them for family consumption. The photos showed a different kind of success, one that didn't translate easily into impressive visuals or compelling statistics. There were images of me speaking at a cybersecurity conference, but without context, it looked like any other business presentation. Pictures of my office showed a functional workspace with computers and servers, equipment that looked expensive to those who understood technology, but mundane to those who didn't. She's been traveling quite a bit for work, Mom continued, showing photos from various cities where I'd met with clients or attended industry events. But whereas Kevin's construction sites and Marcus's dental practice provided obvious visual evidence of success, my business existed largely in the digital realm, protecting assets and preventing threats that remained invisible to the casual observer. The questions my family asked were polite, but revealed their fundamental lack of understanding about what I actually did for a living. They asked about the size of my office, the number of employees, and whether I had plans to expand into a larger space. Questions that applied traditional business metrics to a company that operated according to different principles. Marcus asked, whether I had considered franchising my cybersecurity services, a question that demonstrated his assumption that success required replication and physical expansion. Kevin wondered if I'd thought about specializing in construction industry security, since that was a field he understood and could potentially refer business. Jessica suggested that I should consider hiring a marketing firm to help promote my services, since she'd noticed I didn't have much of a social media presence. Their suggestions were well-intentioned, but based on business models that didn't apply to cybersecurity services. They couldn't understand that my industry valued discretion over publicity, that many of my clients preferred vendors who maintained low profiles rather than those who advertised their security services widely. The idea that success in cybersecurity often meant staying invisible, preventing problems rather than solving them dramatically, was completely foreign to their experience. The family review continued with discussions about plans for the following year, with each family member outlining ambitious goals and expansion strategies. Marcus and Jennifer talked about opening their second dental office and possibly franchising their practice model to other markets. Kevin described his plans to bid on larger municipal projects and potentially expand into commercial real estate development. Jessica and Richard were considering purchasing additional investment properties and had scheduled meetings with financial advisors about more aggressive portfolio strategies. They talked about the possibility of Richard pursuing an MBA that would position him for executive-level positions within his pharmaceutical company. When the conversation turned to my plans for the coming year, I kept my answers deliberately vague, mentioning continued growth and new client acquisition without providing specifics. I couldn't tell them about the months of preparation for DataGuard Solutions' initial public offering, the countless meetings with investment bankers and securities lawyers, or the intensive due diligence process that had consumed most of my time over the past year. The irony wasn't lost on me that while they were planning expansions and investments measured in thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, I was preparing for a business event that would be measured in hundreds of millions. Tomorrow's IPO would transform DataGuard Solutions from a successful small business into a publicly traded company with institutional investors and quarterly earnings reports. As the evening wound down and family members began gathering their coats and preparing for the drive home, the conversation turned to plans for future gatherings and vacation schedules that would need to be coordinated around everyone's busy lives. There were discussions about summer reunions and holiday traditions, the kinds of forward-looking conversations that had always characterized our family gatherings. But tomorrow, I knew, would mark a fundamental shift in these family dynamics. Tomorrow, the business section of every major newspaper would carry the story of DataGuard Solutions' debut on NASDAQ, complete with opening stock prices and analyst projections that would make it impossible for my family to continue viewing my work as a small-scale computer hobby. The little computer thing they'd been politely tolerating for years was about to become very big news, and their annual family review would never be quite the same again. The drive back to my downtown apartment took longer than usual, partly because of the holiday traffic, but mostly because I found myself taking the scenic route through the neighborhoods where I'd grown up. The familiar streets looked different somehow, as if I was seeing them through the lens of someone who had spent the evening being systematically reminded of her place in the family hierarchy. The modest houses with their carefully maintained lawns and holiday decorations represented a world I'd moved beyond, both geographically and professionally. But emotionally, I still felt tethered to the expectations and judgments that had shaped my childhood. My apartment building stood in stark contrast to the suburban homes I'd just left, a converted warehouse in the arts district that had been transformed into modern loft-style living spaces. The building's industrial aesthetic, with its exposed brick walls and large windows, appealed to young professionals and entrepreneurs who valued urban convenience over suburban comfort. My unit on the 4th floor offered a view of the city, skyline that I'd grown to love, especially at night when the office buildings created a geometric pattern of light against the darkness. The apartment itself reflected my practical approach to success, furnished with quality pieces that prioritized function over fashion. The living room featured a comfortable sectional sofa where I often worked late into the evening, reviewing security protocols or preparing presentations for potential clients. My home office occupied what had originally been designed as a second bedroom, equipped with multiple monitors, high-end computers, and secure communication equipment that allowed me to work remotely when necessary. As I settled into my evening routine, checking emails and reviewing tomorrow's schedule, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had marked a turning point in my relationship with my family. The annual review had felt more pointed this year, their success stories more elaborate and their questions about my business more skeptical. Perhaps it was my imagination, but there seemed to be an undercurrent of concern about my choices, as if they were genuinely worried that I'd chosen the wrong path. The truth was, I had been questioning some of my decisions lately, not about my business or career, but about how much I should share with my family about my actual success. For years, I'd maintained a deliberately low profile, partly out of professional necessity, but also because I'd wanted to see whether they valued me for who I was, rather than what I'd accomplished financially. Tonight's gathering had provided a clear answer to that question. My phone buzzed with a text message from my business partner and chief technology officer, David Chen, who was spending Christmas with his own family in San Francisco. "Hope your family dinner went well. Tomorrow's going to be crazy. Are you ready for this?" The message included several emoji that conveyed both excitement and nervous energy, emotions I'd been experiencing myself as we approached the IPO launch. David. And I had founded DataGuard Solutions together 5 years ago, combining my military background in cybersecurity with his expertise in software development and systems architecture. We'd met at a veterans networking event, both of us struggling to translate our military experience into civilian business success. David had served as a communications specialist in the Air Force, managing secure networks for overseas operations, while my Army experience had focused on protecting critical infrastructure from both physical and digital threats. Our partnership had been built on complementary skills and shared values, particularly the military principle that mission success required absolute reliability and attention to detail. In the cybersecurity industry, where a single failure could result in millions of dollars in losses for clients, this mindset had proven invaluable. We'd built DataGuard Solutions on the foundation that security was not a product to be sold, but a service to be delivered with unwavering consistency. I typed back a response to David's message. "Family dinner was interesting. Ready as we'll ever be for tomorrow. Hope your parents are proud of what we've built." It was a simple message, but it carried undertones that David would understand. His family had been supportive of his entrepreneurial journey from the beginning, investing emotionally and sometimes financially in his success. My family's lukewarm response to my business achievements had been a source of ongoing frustration, one that David had witnessed during our years of partnership. The evening news was broadcasting a year-end review of major business stories, including several IPOs that had launched successfully despite challenging market conditions. I watched with professional interest as financial analysts discussed the factors that contributed to successful public offerings, knowing that in less than 12 hours, DataGuard Solutions would be joining the ranks of publicly traded companies. The process of taking a company public had been more complex and emotionally demanding than I'd anticipated when we first began exploring the possibility 2 years ago. Investment bankers had conducted exhaustive reviews of our financial records, business model, and growth projections, questioning every aspect of our operations with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for criminal investigations. Securities. Lawyers had drafted hundreds of pages of documentation, ensuring compliance with regulations that governed how publicly traded companies could communicate with investors and the media. The due diligence process had required me to articulate the value proposition of DataGuard Solutions in terms that institutional investors could understand and evaluate. This meant translating our military-inspired approach to cybersecurity into the language of quarterly earnings projections, market share analysis, and competitive positioning strategies. It had been challenging to maintain the integrity of our mission-focused culture while satisfying the profit-oriented expectations of potential shareholders. Throughout the IPO preparation process, I'd been careful not to discuss the details with my family, partly because of professional confidentiality requirements, but also because I wasn't sure how they would react to the magnitude of what we were attempting. Taking a company public was a significant achievement in the business world, but it also represented a level of success that might fundamentally alter their perception of my career choices and lifestyle decisions. My laptop chimed with an email from our investment banking team, confirming final details for tomorrow's opening bell ceremony at NASDAQ. The email included logistical information about media interviews, timing for the ceremonial bell ringing, and protocols for managing the initial trading activity. Reading through the schedule, I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension about the public attention that would accompany our market debut. The guest list for tomorrow's ceremony included David and myself, our lead investors, key members of our management team, and several board members who had provided strategic guidance throughout the IPO process. Notably absent would be any family members, not because they weren't invited, but because I'd never mentioned the event to them. The decision to keep tomorrow's milestone private from my family had been deliberate, but tonight's dinner had reinforced my feeling that they wouldn't have understood its significance anyway. I opened my laptop and began reviewing the press materials that would be distributed to financial media outlets tomorrow morning. The press release described DataGuard Solutions as a rapidly growing cybersecurity firm specializing in enterprise-level threat detection and prevention services, with annual revenue growth exceeding 200% for 3 consecutive years. The document included quotes from industry analysts who predicted continued expansion in the cybersecurity market, driven by increasing digital threats and regulatory requirements for data protection. The financial details outlined in the IPO prospectus painted a picture of success that would have been difficult for my family to ignore or minimize. DataGuard Solutions had generated over $50 million in revenue in the past fiscal year, with profit margins that exceeded industry averages and a client retention rate above 95%. Our government contracts alone were worth more than Marcus's entire dental practice, while our enterprise clients included Fortune 500 companies that paid annual retainers exceeding Kevin's largest construction projects. But the numbers that would truly shock my family were the valuation projections and stock price estimates that investment bankers had calculated based on our growth trajectory and market position. The initial public offering was expected to value DataGuard Solutions at over $800 million, with my personal stake in the company representing a net worth that would place me among the wealthiest individuals in our home state. The irony of tomorrow's timing wasn't lost on me. Less than 24 hours after being subtly dismissed as the family's least successful member, I would be participating in a business milestone that represented the culmination of years of hard work, strategic planning, and calculated risks. The little computer thing they'd been politely tolerating would be revealed as a major cybersecurity company with institutional investors and Wall Street analysts following its every move. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing talking points for tomorrow's media interviews, practicing responses to questions about our business model, growth strategy, and competitive advantages. The preparation felt similar to mission briefings I'd conducted in the military, where clear communication and confident delivery could mean the difference between success and failure. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on the strange juxtaposition of tonight's family gathering and tomorrow's corporate milestone. My siblings had spent the evening showcasing their achievements in traditional business terms that our parents could easily understand and appreciate. Tomorrow, I would be standing on the NASDAQ trading floor, representing a company that had grown beyond anything they could have imagined when they'd been offering career advice and expressing concern about my unconventional choices. The challenge now would be deciding how and when to share this news with my family, and whether the revelation would fundamentally change our relationships or simply add another layer of complexity to dynamics that had been developing for years. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter in my professional life, but it might also signal the end of my family's comfortable assumptions about success, achievement, and who among us had truly made the most of their opportunities. Woke at 5:30 a.m. to the sound of my phone buzzing with notifications, earlier than my usual alarm, but exactly when I'd expected the financial markets in Asia to begin reacting to DataGuard Solutions' IPO announcement. The pre-market trading activity in international markets often provided early indicators of how American investors would respond to new public offerings, and our investment banking team had been monitoring global sentiment throughout the night. My apartment's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, still dark except for the scattered lights of early commuters and shift workers beginning their day. The contrast between the quiet morning and the chaos I knew would soon unfold felt surreal, like standing in the eye of a hurricane that hadn't yet revealed its full power. The first text message was from David, sent from his hotel room in San Francisco, where he'd flown to meet with West Coast investors before today's ceremony. Reuters picked up the story, Bloomberg too, stock futures looking strong. This is really happening. His message was followed by several screenshots of financial news headlines that featured DataGuard Solutions prominently, describing our IPO as one of the most anticipated cybersecurity offerings of the year. I made coffee and settled at my kitchen island with my laptop, scrolling through the early morning coverage that was already appearing on financial websites and business news platforms. The Wall Street Journal had published a comprehensive analysis of our company's growth trajectory, comparing our revenue expansion to other successful cybersecurity firms that had gone public in recent years. Forbes had included DataGuard Solutions in their morning briefing of companies to watch, highlighting our government contracts and enterprise client base as indicators of sustainable growth potential. The coverage was uniformly positive, with analysts praising our military-inspired approach to cybersecurity and our track record of preventing high-profile breaches for major corporations. Several articles mentioned my background as an Army veteran, describing how military training had influenced our company's culture of precision and reliability. Reading these descriptions of my professional achievements felt strange after last night's family gathering, where my military service had been politely acknowledged but never presented as a significant career advantage. My phone rang with a call from our public relations firm, confirming the schedule for media interviews that would begin in 2 hours. The PR team had arranged appearances on 3 major financial news programs, followed by print interviews with business journalists who would publish follow-up stories throughout the week. These interviews would be my first opportunity to explain DataGuard Solutions' mission and growth strategy to a national audience, a responsibility that felt both exciting and daunting. As I prepared for the day ahead, choosing a navy blue suit that projected the kind of professional authority expected of a CEO taking her company public, I couldn't help thinking about my family members who were probably just beginning to wake up on this post-Christmas morning. They would start their day with coffee and leftover turkey, checking social media and planning the quiet activities that typically filled the days between Christmas and New Year's Eve. None of them would be expecting to see my name in the business section of their morning newspapers or to hear about DataGuard Solutions on the financial news programs they occasionally watched. The revelation would come as a complete surprise, forcing them to reassess everything they thought they knew about my career and success. The drive to the NASDAQ studios in Times Square took me through Manhattan's streets that were surprisingly busy for the day after Christmas. The financial district never truly slept, and today's IPO activity was just one of thousands of business transactions that would occur before most people finished their morning coffee. The energy of the city felt different on days like this, charged with the kind of possibility that only existed when significant amounts of money were about to change hands. The NASDAQ building itself was a monument to American capitalism, its electronic displays showing real-time stock prices and market movements that influenced economic decisions around the world. As our car pulled up to the entrance, I could see television crews setting up equipment for live broadcasts that would carry news of DataGuard Solutions' market debut to viewers across the country. David was waiting in the lobby, dressed in his own carefully chosen suit and carrying a leather portfolio that contained final copies of our IPO documentation. His expression combined excitement with the kind of focused intensity I remembered from our military days, when important missions required complete concentration and flawless execution. "Ready to make history?" he asked, extending his hand for the firm handshake that had become our traditional pre-mission ritual. The gesture transported me back to our first meeting at the Veterans Networking event, when we'd been two former soldiers trying to figure out how to translate our military skills into civilian business success. The morning interviews went smoothly, with financial journalists asking informed questions about our business model, competitive advantages, and growth projections. I found myself drawing on military communication training, delivering clear and concise responses that conveyed confidence without overselling our capabilities. The questions were challenging but fair, focusing on substantive business issues, rather than the personal background stories that sometimes dominated media coverage of female CEOs. During one particularly insightful interview, a CNBC anchor asked about the role my military experience had played in shaping DataGuard Solutions' approach to cybersecurity. I explained how military training had taught me to think systematically about threats, to prepare for scenarios that seemed unlikely but could have catastrophic consequences, and to maintain operational readiness even during periods of apparent calm. In the military, we learned that the most dangerous threats are often the ones you don't see coming, I said, looking directly into the camera that would carry my words to viewers across the country. That's why DataGuard Solutions focuses on proactive threat detection rather than reactive damage control. We help our clients identify and neutralize security risks before they become security breaches. The opening bell ceremony itself was surprisingly emotional, a formal ritual that marked the transition from private company to public corporation. Standing on the NASDAQ trading floor, surrounded by our investors and key employees, I felt the weight of everything we'd accomplished over the past 5 years. The ceremonial bell ringing lasted only a few seconds, but it represented thousands of hours of work, countless strategic decisions, and the kind of calculated risks that separated successful entrepreneurs from those who remained safely employed by others. As trading began and DataGuard Solutions' stock symbol appeared on the electronic displays throughout the building, I watched our share price climb steadily above the initial offering price. The market's response exceeded our most optimistic projections, with institutional investors demonstrating the kind of confidence in our business model that we'd worked years to earn. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from clients, industry colleagues, and business partners who had been following our IPO announcement throughout the morning. Several government officials who worked with our cybersecurity team sent formal congratulations, acknowledging the significance of having a veteran-owned company achieve this level of success in the private sector. But the message that surprised me most came from my neighbor in Cedar Rapids, Mrs. Henderson, who had been watching the morning financial news and recognized my name. "Saw you on TV this morning, dear. Your parents must be so proud. Congratulations on your big success." Her text was followed by a screenshot of the news segment where I'd been interviewed, proof that the story was reaching audiences far beyond the financial community. Within hours, the news had spread through social media and local news outlets, with several Iowa newspapers picking up the story of a hometown success that had achieved national recognition. The Cedar Rapids Gazette published an article titled, "Local Veteran Takes Cybersecurity Company Public," complete with quotes from former teachers and community leaders who remembered my childhood and military service. By mid-afternoon, DataGuard Solutions stock had stabilized at a price that valued the company at over $900 million, exceeding our investment bankers' most optimistic projections. My personal stake in the company, which I'd built from nothing over 5 years of 18-hour workdays and strategic sacrifices, was now worth more than the combined net worth of my entire extended family. The financial milestone felt significant, but what mattered more was the validation of the business model we'd developed and the military-inspired culture we'd worked to create. DataGuard Solutions had proven that veteran-owned businesses could compete successfully in the most demanding sectors of the modern economy, and that military training provided valuable preparation for entrepreneurial leadership. As the trading day concluded and we prepared for the celebration dinner our investors had organized, I finally allowed myself to think about how my family would react to the news. By now, someone would have seen the coverage and shared it with the others, forcing them to reconcile their assumptions about my career with the reality of what I'd actually accomplished. The little computer thing they'd been politely tolerating had become a publicly traded corporation worth nearly $1 billion, transforming their least successful family member into one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the state. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities, but tonight was for celebrating the kind of achievement that justified every sacrifice and validated every risk we'd taken along the way. If you've ever been underestimated by people who couldn't see your potential, or if you've built something meaningful while others questioned your choices, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms and letting your achievements speak for themselves. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming doubt and proving the doubters wrong, because everyone deserves to have their moment of vindication.